Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Tales of the Unexpected Season 3. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The first story begins with a sense of unease and fear that has been looming over a suburban area in the UK. This is because a local schoolgirl has been missing for 5 days. Her characteristics, 12 years old with short blonde hair, are repeatedly broadcasted on national television. When she disappeared, the schoolgirl was wearing a green skirt and a white school uniform that was easily recognizable as part of her school's outfit. A search team of around 10 police officers, along with search dogs, have been conducting a thorough search. Eventually, the rescue team recovered body parts believed to be the girl's from a lake near the swamp. Meanwhile, after school, a girl named Sylvia returns home. Upon entering, she hears her grandmother asking her to say hello to her distant cousin. Although Sylvia feels a bit socially anxious and reluctant, she turns around and greets her cousin. He asks Sylvia how her piano practice has been going. Sylvia responds with a casual, "just okay," but her inner thoughts were that she really hates the piano and wants her grandma to stop showing off how well she plays. When her grandmother leaves to see her cousin off, Sylvia goes to her room and casually turns on the TV. The host announces that after 5 days of searching, the police have found the schoolgirl's body. Just then, her grandmother walks in and turns off the TV, saying she shouldn't watch this and should stop calling her grandma since it makes her sound too old. So why does Sylvia live with her grandmother? It's a tragic story. Sylvia's parents passed away in an accident 2 years ago. This has left her with the typical image of a child growing up in an abandoned home, someone hard to approach, always wanting to be alone. The next day after school, Sylvia notices something strange while walking along the street. She spots an old, creepy man squinting his eyes at a fence. She tries to convince herself that she is not here and he can't see her. Unfortunately, when he opens his eyes, he continues to secretly stare at her. When she gets on the school bus, her worst fear comes true. The old man sits directly across from her. Sylvia thinks this is the man who killed the schoolgirl. As the man smiles and greets her, Sylvia stays silent, but in her mind she just wants him to shut up and the stop is coming soon. But much to her annoyance, the old man keeps talking, finding new topics to discuss. He asks her if she plays the piano and which composer she likes. Sylvia nonchalantly responds with the name of a composer. The old man continues, asking if her name is Sylvia. Surprised, Sylvia asks how he knows her name. The man responds that it's right there on her school uniform. The man grows more excited and sings a poorly off-key song and then sits right next to Sylvia. Luckily, just as the old man sits down, the bus arrives at the stop. Sylvia quickly joins the line to get off. After getting off, she heads straight to a nearby phone booth without thinking, instinctively wanting to report the situation. But then, something unexpected happens. As Sylvia approaches the booth, she notices the phone line has been cut. The old man suddenly appears and asks if she wants to report him. Sylvia, now furious, tells him to get away with his old butt, or she will scream aloud in a chicken voice. At that moment, a woman who had been on the same bus approaches with a stick, giving the old man a final warning, telling him not to mess with that girl. If he tries anything creepy, she will break his creepy face. The old man mutters curses under his breath and walks away. The woman quickly escorts Sylvia to her home. On the way, she asks if her mom ever told her not to talk to strangers. Sylvia replies flatly that her mom passed away. The woman then asks who she lives with now. Sylvia answers that she lives with her grandmother. The woman asks again if her grandmother ever told her these things. She tells her not to look back since that creepy old man is following them. The woman took Sylvia straight to her house. Once inside, she sighed, saying she was barely holding it together just now. She was really scared that the old man might actually make a move. They'd be in real trouble if that happened. She asks Sylvia if she still wants to call the police and advises her to stay for dinner. Sylvia simply thanks the woman. The woman continued, saying anyone would step in to help in a situation like that. She then pulled out a phone book and proposed to call the local police and report what happened. Just as she dialed the number and began explaining the situation, the door swung open and an unexpected twist unfolded. There stood the old man from before. The woman wasn't at all surprised. The two exchanged cheek kisses and the woman smiled, saying he came back just in time. It turned out that Sylvia had been duped. The old man and the woman were in cahoots. Soon after, the old man closed and locked the door, and the pair sat down to eat as if nothing had happened. As Sylvia glanced up at the flypaper hanging overhead, she realized with a chill that she had been lured in like a fly, step by step. When she tried to leave, it was too late. The old man blocked her way, saying her dinner isn't over yet. The second story takes place in a remote suburban area where an elderly woman named Hazel lives with her son. Even though she constantly nags him that he is old enough to do his own laundry by now, she still fusses over him, finding a clean shirt to hand him as he gets ready for work. Once he's got the shirt, he leaves for his job. Not long after, a man named Drew drives past Hazel's house in a van with a few pieces of furniture on the roof. How to describe Drew? Calling him a scammer might be a bit harsh, although he's not far from it. Drew is the sort of guy who drives around buying up valuable items at dirt cheap prices. In plain language, he's a junk collector. If an item could fetch $50 at the scrapyard, Drew usually offers around $20 for it, and he especially targets the elderly. When he first pulls up to Hazel's farmhouse, Drew begins rifling through the place looking for anything he could snag. Hazel comes out and asks if she can help him. Drew quickly hands her a business card and introduces himself that he buys secondhand goods, old furniture, clothes, appliances, anything she doesn't need. Hazel hands back the card, saying she's afraid she doesn't have anything to sell. Drew is incredulous, saying the old ladies in the village over there always have a pile of odds and ends for him. He then tells her nothing comes with her when she leaves this world. Even if it's just a few pounds, she could use that extra cash to treat herself at Christmas. Hearing this, Hazel admits she does have 2 old-fashioned irons she could sell. Drew's eyes brighten. He then offers her $10 for them. Pleased with the price, Hazel leads Drew inside to fetch the irons. Once indoors, Hazel starts chatting just like any old woman might, grumbling that her son is worse than him at this rubbish collection business. He's always messing about, his job's unstable, and he's dead set on moving to the big city. At her age, she can't let him go off like that because she needs him to stay here with her. After that, Hazel heads off to the back room to get the irons. Seizing the opportunity, Drew's true colors start to show. He quickly begins rummaging around for anything valuable he can nick. After a fruitless search, his attention is caught by a painting hanging on the wall. As he gets a closer look, he realizes the style isn't contemporary at all. Knowing a bit about art himself, Drew carefully takes the painting down to check for a label on the back. And there it was, a label with an English inscription stating it was painted in 1820 by a well-known artist. Over 150 years old, this could be worth a fortune. Just then, hearing Hazel approaching, Drew hastily hangs the painting back up, pretending nothing is amiss. After accepting the old irons from Hazel, Drew feigns confusion and offers a price. He knows that mentioning the painting right away might tip his hand. So, after chatting idly with Hazel for a bit, he stands up, walks over to the painting, and in a roundabout way asks her if this is a painting for sale and he will offer $30. Hazel refused outright. Drew was intrigued, wondering if this painting has some special significance. Hazel said it didn't. It was just something left behind by the previous owner, and it always hung there. Hearing that it wasn't completely off the table, Drew took that as a cue to start bidding higher. He then offered $35, pulling out the cash. Feeling confident, Drew pushed harder, telling her this is all the money he has. $300, he'll give her the lot. Hazel hesitated for a moment before finally agreeing reluctantly. Drew carefully took the painting down, picked up the 2 irons, and hurried out to his van. Just as Drew drove off, Hazel's son returned home. He walked in, saw the cash on the table and the empty spot on the wall, and instantly understood what had happened. Without wasting a second, he grabbed the money, jumped into his car, and sped off after Drew. With a sharp swerve, he cut Drew off and forced him to stop. Stepping out of the car, he got straight to the point, telling him to take his smelly money back since the painting's not for sale. Drew didn't even flinch, saying he didn't understand how a transaction works and the deal's done. Without waiting for a reply, Drew reversed the car, turned sharply, and sped away. Hazel's son stood there, helpless, as if he'd seen this play out before. Back at home, Hazel's son sat her down for a talk. He said he had told her so many times, even if she didn't care about him, she should at least try to do the right thing. Hazel gave him a knowing smile, saying there are not many more years left and she's having fun. With that, she went up to the storage room on the 2nd floor, switched on the light, and set up a projector. The image of an 1820 painting lit up on the wall. Calmly and skillfully, Hazel began tracing it, recreating the piece with practiced ease. It turns out the old lady was sharp. That priceless 1820 painting, of course, wasn't for sale. If Drew wanted to buy it, Hazel would just make him a fake. No wonder her son reacted that way. Hazel had pulled this trick more times than he could count. The third story begins in October 1976, when a female secretary answered a phone call in her usual manner, telling the person on the line to hold on because their chairman is in a meeting with his son, George. No sooner had she hung up than she heard a noise from the room that sounded like gunshots. Instinctively, she pressed the button and called out to the chairman if everything was all right. Receiving no response, she got up and knocked on the door. When there was still no answer and she was about to open it, she bumped into George. Calmly, he told her to come in and see for herself. He had already checked, and he was sure the chairman was dead. The secretary asked if they should call the police. Glancing toward the room, she saw the chairman with blood oozing from his face. A bullet had struck his left temple, and he lay motionless. Quick on her feet, she locked the door behind her and shouted to her colleague to call the police, since the chairman had been shot. What happened next followed the standard procedure for a baffling case. A detective, along with a team of specialists, arrived to investigate. 2 officers entered the office and confirmed that George, the main suspect, was unarmed. After asking a few basic questions, George replied coolly that he didn't know the weapon they meant. The detective shot back, saying he's playing dumb. He then stepped out to ask the secretary and the colleague if they had any additional details, but both insisted they were as clueless as could be. Earlier that morning, George had unexpectedly gone in to talk with his father. The situation was straightforward. In the closed office, there were only the chairman and George. Stepping out onto the balcony, the detective surveyed the parking lots below and across the street, musing that the bullet which struck the chairman might even have been fired by a sniper lying in wait. Regardless of the theory, George remained the prime suspect. Seeing that George was acting completely nonchalant, the detective told him to stop pretending. This office is on the 6th floor. There's no ladder outside that someone could have climbed in on. It had to be George and his father in there. The detective then turned to ask why he killed his father and where the gun was. George merely smiled. The detective warned him if George won't confess, he'll find out for him. Following his lead, his team combed the lawn beneath the office building, turning over every nook and cranny, hoping the gun might have been dropped somewhere nearby. Meanwhile, the forensic team arrived and began collecting evidence. They took skin tissue from George, even from beneath his fingernails, and examined the traces around the chairman's gunshot wound. When the team reported that nothing had been found on the lawn, George ordered that all suspicious vehicles in the area be checked. Before the lab results came in, the forensic expert remarked that the victim lost a lot of blood. The detective said there's got to be a gun and it must be found. He then approached the secretary, asking if she saw George come out of the office after she heard the shot. The secretary told him there's no way George could have come out because she made sure to lock the door when she had her colleague call the police. The colleague confirmed that, indeed, that's exactly what happened. The detective pressed further, asking if she noticed if George had a gun in his hand when she went in. The secretary admitted that she didn't pay any attention since she was in complete shock. Her first thought was to get out of there as fast as she could. Looking around the chairman's office, the officers were puzzled. One wondered where the safe was. The secretary replied the safe was in the small room over there. With her keys in hand, she went to the small room and helped open the safe. And sure enough, as she had said, the safe didn't hold any cash, only some of the chairman's documents. George continued to play innocent, saying he could not kill his father. He was talking to him when he walked over to the window and even mentioned how nice the view was outside. Then he heard some kind of noise, and the next thing he knew, his father was dead like a piece of shit. The detective was getting frustrated. He vowed to find the evidence and the motive, and when he did, George was going to prison. George smirked, telling the detective to be careful with those bold statements. The detective then ordered his team to take George back to the station. Meanwhile, officers on site reported that they'd swept the entire area around the building, including the cars parked below, but had found no sign of a gun. The detective barked at them to check the trash cans and tear apart the office if they had to. Just find that gun! Back at the station, the detective launched a second round of investigation. He ordered his men to check if George and his father had any conflicts, and he needs the forensic results ASAP. No one's going home until this case is solved. He called the team at the office. They confirmed they were still searching every inch of the office, but so far, no gun. The detective headed to the interrogation room and went hard at George. He accused George of locking the door from the inside, arguing with his father, then shooting him. George said it wasn't him and there is no way he would confess to something he didn't do. Seriously, what kind of idiot would kill someone in a locked room where they can't even escape? The detective narrowed his eyes, saying maybe that's exactly what makes George so clever. Once he finds the gun, George won't be able to deny it. Not long after, the lead coroner submitted some initial findings. The skin tissue found under George's fingernails didn't match the traces from the chairman's gunshot wound. However, based on the bullet's caliber, the murder weapon was likely a metal revolver. The detective immediately relayed this to his team, saying they were looking for a metal revolver. Even if it's in pieces, find it. The killer might have destroyed the gun. Soon, more background information came in, and the detective returned to the interrogation room with renewed energy. He said George's father left him an inheritance of $2 million, but he also had a mistress who ended up getting tens of times more than that. That's why George hated his father for it. So he killed his father out of revenge. Of course, that woman turned out to be a con artist. George leaned back, saying this is all just his theory and the police still need evidence. The detective shot back, saying they were working on it and he used a revolver. Even though he destroyed it, they were looking for the fragments. Then the detective called in the secretary. A letter had surfaced showing that she had planned to resign that very day. Plus, her claim that she'd taken a month-long vacation in Australia turned out to be false. She didn't even have a fiancé. The secretary explained that the chairman thought she was leaking company secrets. He was going to fire her anyway, so she figured she'd quit first. As for the fake vacation, she just didn't want her co-workers gossiping about him. The detective wasn't convinced. He turned to George, pointing out that he just got back from Australia this morning. He then faced the secretary, mentioning she went to Australia too. He asked her why she told George about his father's affair and if she was trying to stir things up between them. More importantly, if they two were having an affair themselves. Both George and the secretary looked stunned. The detective pressed on, saying they two were in it together. They wanted the $2 million inheritance. That's why they teamed up and killed the chairman. The secretary fired back, saying she was the one who locked the door and called her colleague right away, and George and she have nothing going on. The detective paused, sensing something was off. He double-checked with his team, and it turned out his theory didn't hold up. The woman who conned the chairman was someone else entirely. The secretary had no connection to the crime and no motive, so he had to let her go. George's lawyer soon arrived, and with no evidence tying George to the crime and no gun or fragments found, the detective had no choice but to let George go too. Frustrated, he could only threaten him that this is far over. But without solid evidence, the case went cold. 1 month later, a colleague handed the detective a poster, and it made his blood run cold. The poster was for the Beck Brothers circus, and it featured George. According to the text, George was a magician known for swallowing metal objects. It all clicked. George had swallowed the gun after shooting his father, then let himself be caught, knowing the gun would never be found. If they had just taken him for an X-ray that day, the case would have been solved on the spot. The detective stared at the poster, seething with regret that they were this close. The fourth story begins with Tom and his mate George holed up in their rented flat, waking up to fix a bit of grub, bantering back and forth and searching for those small moments of joy. Compared to the bitter cold outside, this was the easiest way to forget their troubles. After all, times were tough. The two had been out of work for months. While flipping through the newspaper, Tom recounted the day's top story to George. Apparently, a property tycoon had hightailed it with a load of cash, and shockingly, a media man was out there defending him. Tom mused that their unemployment woes are nothing compared to what those homebuyers are going through. They're losing everything. As Tom ruminated on the story, inspiration struck. He declared he got a cracking idea. This tycoon's on the lam, and those angry homebuyers are clenching their fists with rage. Imagine if they caught sight of that dodgy media man alongside him. They'd beat the lot of them black and blue. He then proposed to George that they should start a revenge company, specializing in giving people a proper thrashing. George's eyes lit up. He said that's got potential, and if they were going to do it, they might as well offer a menu of options. How about $250 for a punch to the nose, $300 for a black eye, $500 for the full bruised and battered package, and if someone wants a full-on kidnapping, that'll be $1,000. With their excitement mounting, the pair immediately printed up some flyers that afternoon and stuffed them into every mailbox in the local estate. When a homeowner named Mrs. Wilbur opened one of these little cards and saw the price list, she couldn't help but be intrigued. Sure enough, Mrs. Wilbur quickly wrote back with a business inquiry. When Tom and George received her reply, they practically leapt out of bed. They thought with this kind of cash, they wouldn't have to live in this dump anymore. They could even move to a proper flat. At a minimum of $250 a day, it sounds brilliant. That same afternoon, they paid Mrs. Wilbur a visit. Once seated, Mrs. Wilbur explained that money isn't an issue in her household, and her husband's reputation is very important to her. She then pointed out the media man was always smoothing things over in the papers, stirring up trouble, and sometimes even bad-mouthing her husband. So she wanted them to give the man a good beating, make sure he can't even tell who did it, because her husband's name must stay untarnished. Tom quickly told her not to worry, and they would use a bit of makeup to cover their tracks. They were professionals. Mrs. Wilbur added with a smile, saying she used to be an actress, so she could do their makeup for free. And just like that, their partnership was sealed. To avoid any trace, the next day, Tom and George rented a car. That evening, they drove to the restaurant hosting the media man's party. Before setting off, Tom reviewed the plan with George one last time. George would take this letter over to the door and tell the security guard there that they got breaking news, a tip about the media man, and that he's needed urgently. That meddlesome media man won't be able to resist. When he comes out, deliver a solid punch to his nose, then get back to the car and meet up with him. They would get out of there sharpish. Armed with the letter and a thrill of anticipation, George got out of the car and made his way to the restaurant entrance. He flagged down the security guard and explained the situation. The guard, however, wasn't too keen to get involved, partly because he'd twisted his ankle and was in a bad mood. No matter though, a little extra tip later, and the guard was bribed into action. He went inside, passed the message on to the media man, and sure enough, the man fell for it. Stepping out, the man asked what this breaking news was about. George leaned in and told him to get a bit closer. As the man approached, George landed a swift punch right on his running nose. Then, without wasting a second, he bolted back towards the car to rendezvous with Tom. Just then, an elderly man dressed much like George suddenly appeared on the street, shouting excitedly that he saw the whole thing and thanking them for taking care of business. George mumbled as he dashed into the car. Tom hit the accelerator and the two of them sped off into the night. At that moment, a dramatic turn of events unfolded. No matter who the old man was who suddenly appeared, the two security guards came over and gave him a good beating before dragging him off. This is because the old man's outfit was identical to George's from earlier. Both of them had dressed in private investigator style. Tom and George, excitedly reflecting on the events as they drove away, suddenly realized something wasn't right. Tom said when they left, that old man was wearing the exact same clothes as George, his voice filled with sudden realization, and the makeup was Mrs. Wilbur's doing, and the outfit was her suggestion too. He then realized they had been played. It all became clear. They had fallen into Mrs. Wilbur's trap. It seemed she had her own agenda, planning to pin the blame on the old man. The shock of the situation made Tom lose focus, and in that moment, he accidentally crashed the car into an advertising billboard, sending both of them tumbling into a ditch. The fifth story begins with Susie and her best friend Pat being two actresses at a local theater. When they weren't in the backstage area gossiping about the old actors in the troupe, they would continue their banter and self-amusement during the quick breaks between performances, perhaps out of habit at this point, comfortable in their easygoing routine. One day, they ran into an elderly man in the makeup room. Susie smiled politely and exchanged warm greetings with him rather than smelly kisses. But as the old man introduced himself, she and Pat realized he was the producer, Herbert, who is the one financing everything. Upon hearing that Herbert's wife had passed away and that he was visiting the theater to take his mind off things, Susie suddenly felt a wave of empathy. She told him when she first walked in and saw his peeping eyes, she could sense a certain sadness. Herbert, a bit taken aback by her comment, replied that he was actually thinking of inviting her to dinner. He then asked if Pat would like to join them. Pat instantly understood that Herbert was interested in Susie, and she graciously declined. After getting dressed, Susie happily went off to spend time with Herbert. Later that evening, back at their dorm, Pat teasingly asked if she and the wealthy bachelor hit it off. Susie, somewhat embarrassed, revealed her true feelings. She said, "It's just a bit of fun." She was not interested in a man that old. But to be fair, Herbert has the resources, the status, the money. It's definitely something to think about. He's a bit of a straightforward guy, though, no flirting at all. She had to make all the hormone moves herself. As the two continued chatting, the doorbell rang. Pat opened it to find a delivery of flowers from Herbert. Pat teased that Herbert was actually quite romantic. From the next day, Herbert ramped up his pursuit of Susie. The diamond ring was just the beginning. He'd send waiters over with gold chains during their dates, and before long he presented her with a brand new convertible, asking her to marry him. All these lavish gestures soon wore Susie down, and she agreed to marry him. However, relationships built on materialism tend to come quickly and fade just as fast. Herbert, a man with a strong need for control, started tracking Susie's movements. It didn't take long before Herbert discovered Susie wasn't just a casual flirt. She was an unapologetic womanizer, having an affair with the director of the theater and openly making plans with him in the stairwell during rehearsals. And as if that weren't enough, Herbert found out that Susie had lied about going shopping with Pat and had actually used her own money to meet up with a male model. Unable to tolerate it anymore, Herbert drew a line and demanded they end their relationship. Susie, though, wasn't just venting about her failed relationship. She was already plotting a way to get back into Herbert's good graces. She explained to Pat that Herbert just needs a way out, a chance to back down. She would pretend to commit suicide, and Pat should help her. Susie laid out her plan. The next morning, Pat would call Herbert at 6:30 a.m., telling him that Susie had taken a large dose of sleeping pills and was unresponsive. The hotel she'd choose would need to be close to Herbert's home, so he could get there within 15 minutes. Once Herbert arrived and saw the farewell note Susie had supposedly written, confessing that she only loved him and asking for his forgiveness, he would be so moved that he would save her and cancel the divorce. Pat asked if she took sleeping pills and Herbert didn't show up, what she would do. Susie said she would reach a doctor at the Central Hospital by 7:30. The doctor is also her lover, and he would definitely do whatever it takes to save her. After a bit of back and forth and in the spirit of friendship, Pat agreed. The next morning came, and Susie was still in the hotel, feeling unsure. She asked Pat if she had already tried calling Herbert last night, telling him she was feeling down. She told Pat not to mess this up, make sure she calls him one last time and urges him. After making the call and hanging up, Pat reassured her that Herbert was on his way. Susie then asked Pat to leave so she could change into her favorite white dress. Maybe the scheming woman thought that when Herbert came to rescue her, she could still rekindle his desire. Having taken a large dose of sleeping pills, Susie swallowed them with water and soon drifted off to sleep. At this point, some might already sense where the story is headed. Indeed, why would Pat cooperate? This was the perfect opportunity for her. Once outside the hotel, Pat tossed the apology letter that Susie had written into a mailbox. She didn't plan on giving the letter to Herbert. The phone call last night and the one just now weren't even to Herbert. Pat had dialed random numbers, and the emergency call to the doctor at 7 a.m. wasn't happening either. Pat played the part of being unaware, pretending she had no involvement in Susie's situation. The consequences were inevitable. Susie passed away peacefully in her sleep at the hotel. Before long, it was the 7th day after Susie's death. Herbert came to pay his respects, still baffled. He just didn't understand why Susie would have taken her own life. Listening to his tone, Pat comforted him, telling him not to blame himself. He didn't do anything wrong in his marriage to Susie. Herbert, hearing this, looked at Pat and said he couldn't make it through this past week without her by his side. It seems Herbert was about to become closer to Pat and started their hormone yoga journey. The 6th story begins with Mr. Cyril, a man in his 40s, often driving to the countryside to make his rounds. He claimed to be a priest or the president of the Furniture Association, coming to do charity work and asking villagers to donate old furniture they no longer needed. Of course, if he encountered a real priest, Mr. Cyril would quickly find an excuse to leave. In reality, Mr. Cyril was an antique collector. The Priest and Furniture Association president were just facades, part of his scam to collect old furniture. He was skilled at tailoring his approach to the situation, and poor families were the easiest targets. But don't underestimate Mr. Cyril's business. Every time he visited the countryside, he came back with something of value. Often, these vintage pieces of furniture could be sold for hundreds of pounds, with a reliable channel for resale. Mr. Cyril not only owned his own antique shop, but also lived in a large villa. The next day, he drove out to the countryside, parked his car, and began his work. He arrived at a farmer's house and politely asked if the owner of this house was here. 3 rustic old men, clearly confused, looked at him and asked what he wanted. Mr. Cyril handed them his business card. They took a look at it, but still didn't understand what he was really about. He said he was the president of the Furniture Association and he's running a charity project. Basically, if they have any old furniture they don't need, he'll take it off their hands. By donating, they'll help make society a better place. The 3 men shook their heads, telling him he had come to the wrong place. But Mr. Cyril didn't give up, saying he visited a farmer's house yesterday, and at first the farmer said the same thing. But later, he found an old chair for him and he saw it was worth 400 pounds. He bought it on the spot. The farmer's probably going to buy some cows and sheep today. Hearing that such old furniture could be so valuable, the old man, Rummins, became interested. He told Cyril to come to his house and take a look since he had some furniture Cyril might want. So Rummins led Mr. Cyril and the others to his home. When they entered the living room, Mr. Cyril's hopes faded as Rummins went to fetch some furniture. Nothing seemed valuable at first glance. But then, as Mr. Cyril turned around, he was stunned. Beneath a mink fur coat, he noticed a piece of Thomas Chippendale-style furniture from the 18th century. As Rummins brought over a chair for Mr. Cyril to appraise, Mr. Cyril quickly masked his excitement and adjusted his demeanor to begin the evaluation. He said this stool wasn't worth much, and this table neither. But this vanity with 2 drawers, it might be worth a few dozen pounds. Mr. Cyril then asked if this vanity had been refinished, and if he spray it himself with white paint. Rummins explained a mute man helped him spray it. The mute man looked eager to say something, but Mr. Cyril interrupted, saying once it's been repainted, it loses its value. He was afraid it can only be sold as junk now. He had already bought one of these old vanities. The only issue with that one is the legs. If they would like, he can take it and replace the legs for that one. Hearing this, Rummins realized Mr. Cyril was interested in buying it. He then remembered a label he had found while it was being sprayed. He asked the mute man to dig it out and show it. The mute man, picking up on Rummins's body language, hurriedly went to the drawers and found a furniture label. When the mute man had sprayed the paint, he had found this note. The group read it aloud. The note was from the carpenter who had built the piece, explaining that it was made with high-quality wood for a family celebration, and it had cost £7 to make. As Mr. Cyril took the note, his excitement surged to a new level. This piece of furniture was most likely over 100 years old and worth a small fortune. With his years of experience in buying furniture, Mr. Cyril also knew that the more valuable the piece, the less he could show his interest. He told them the table cost only £7 to make. After all these years, it's even less valuable now. Plus, he was not sure if this label is real or if this carpenter actually made it. Rummins, being an honest farmer, still defended the authenticity of the label, saying, "This label is definitely real. The font is from that time." Mr. Cyril, unwilling to show too much excitement, decided to use his ultimate trick. He took out a knife and scraped a bit of the drawer. He then put on a show for the three men, explaining that this wood isn't authentic and from the sound. It's made from composite wood, not valuable at all. He continued with a long list of criticisms, then pretended to leave. Rummins, seeing that, quickly called out to him if he was buying it or not. He asked Cyril how much he would offer. Mr. Cyril reluctantly gave a quote saying he would pay £10. Rummins, shocked, replied that when it was first made, it cost £7. Mr. Cyril countered that this label is fake. It was probably just written randomly back then. As he said this, he started to walk off. But then he paused and added that he would give £15, but he was mainly interested in the legs of the vanity. He would have to take them off when he got back. Hearing this, Rummins, recognizing the back-and-forth price negotiation, threw out a counteroffer of £35. He pretended to walk away again. Mr. Cyril, turning back, made his final offer. He suggested they settle on £20 and they both take a step back. Rummins agreed. For him, the vanity was just something to prop up the mink coat, and selling it for £20 would help with household expenses. Mr. Cyril, feeling triumphant, said he would go get his car. Once back at the parking area, Mr. Cyril quickly called his associate to get £1,000 ready, eager to share the good news that he found an 18th century Chippendale-style table. But then came an unexpected twist. As Rummins called over the mute man and his friends to help move the table, they struggled with the door. The table's corner got stuck, and after a lot of effort, they managed to get it out. Seeing the vanity's corner, Mr. Cyril drove a regular car, not a truck, so it wouldn't be easy to load and the door couldn't even fit. Since Mr. Cyril said he was only interested in the legs, the men pulled out axes and saws. Within a few moments, they started dismantling the table. The ease with which they disassembled it was uncanny. When Mr. Cyril arrived with his car, the three old men smiled, excited to help. They said they took the legs off to make it easier for him to transport. Mr. Cyril stepped out of the car, sweat immediately beading on his forehead, his face turning pale as he realized what had happened. The seventh story begins with a man named Harold walking down the street when he saw another man getting out of a car not far away. Harold found him somewhat familiar, but as the man walked toward him with enthusiasm, ready to greet him, Harold quickly dodged and pretended not to recognize him. Because at that very moment, Harold realized he was his middle school classmate, Jack. Back in the day, Jack was undoubtedly the school bully. Every time after school or during breaks, Jack would lead a group of troublemakers, either in the bathroom or various other places, surrounding and bullying Harold. He even gave Harold the nickname Bug. That experience was painful and torturous, something that would leave lasting psychological scars on anyone, not just Harold. Back to reality, shaking hands and greeting someone who used to bully him, Harold noticed that Jack seemed to have completely forgotten those memories. Jack even invited him to dinner. It could be a chance to catch up, so Harold agreed. At the restaurant, as he watched Jack mix the condiments, Harold was reminded of the times when Jack forced him to eat leftovers. Though these thoughts lingered in his mind, he remained polite in conversation. After all, Jack was still someone from his past. Jack sighed about the struggles of middle age, how marriage was just so-so, and that a man needed a career. Otherwise, with elderly parents and kids to support, the whole family relied on him. Harold found himself relating to those words. Jack then asked how he had been all these years. Time flew and they were getting old. Harold replied that he had worked as an accountant but was currently unemployed. Hearing that his old classmate was struggling, Jack immediately offered help. He told Harold to come work at his company and manage the accounts, and he would pay him double the salary. Harold said he'd think about it and went home. When he told his wife Phil about the offer, she naturally had something to say. She asked Harold how long he had been out of work. She remembered him mentioning a Jack from middle school who used to bully him. But look at the reality. He's offering him a job with double the pay. She reminded him there was nowhere else he was going to find that. The household expenses are piling up, all on loans. She said Jack was a big boss now and had probably forgotten all about it, but it's not right for him to still hold a grudge. After Phil left, Harold reflected on what she said. She had a point. Looking at the gun in his drawer, he remembered something his strict father used to say. This world is survival of the fittest. You have to fight. After all, money was what really mattered. So Harold accepted Jack's offer. After working there for some time, Harold had to admit that the work environment wasn't bad. As long as Jack was satisfied, everything was fine. Since Jack was the chairman of the group, no one dared to make things difficult for him. One day, after finishing work, Jack invited Harold and his wife over for dinner at his house to celebrate. On the way there, Harold felt his inferiority complex creeping in. Listening to Phil praising Jack, it seemed like Jack's status and success fulfilled her subconscious admiration for powerful men. No wonder she often criticized him. Maybe he really wasn't good enough. But then he thought about Jack's success. Wasn't this the same guy who used to be a school bully? Arriving at Jack's house, Harold couldn't help but feel envious. Jack lived in a luxurious mansion. A butler and servants took care of everything, and his wife, even after years of marriage, was still stunning. He was the definition of a successful man. As dinner went on, Harold felt awkward as Phil flirted with Jack. He couldn't find a way to join the conversation. But then, after some buildup, Phil suddenly questioned Jack on Harold's behalf. She asked him if he thought that was wrong for him to call her husband Bug. Jack smiled but didn't respond. Still, sometimes bringing something up is the first step toward closure. Back home, Phil, completely drunk, wanted to keep drinking. Harold didn't go along with it. He helped her to bed. Drunkenly, Phil muttered that no wonder Jack called him Bug because he had no sense of romance. Even though Harold knew Phil had long been dissatisfied with their marriage and was used to being blunt, hearing her call him Bug still stung. The next day, something unexpected happened. When Harold arrived at the office, Jack greeted him with a surprising statement. He said Harold's wife was right last night. He thought about it, and everyone makes mistakes when they're young. He wanted to apologize. From now on, he won't call Harold Bug anymore. He suggested they just let the past stay in the past. Hearing this, Harold felt a warmth in his heart. He smiled and agreed. But when he got home after work, he froze. Because the car parked outside, its model, its style, looked exactly like Jack's. He wondered if Jack was pretending to make amends with him, but after last night's flirtation with his wife, if the two of them were already having an affair. Harold walked to a phone booth and called Phil, asking if she needed anything as he was almost home. After hanging up, he saw the car drive away from his front door. Even though he had given Phil an out, who knew that when he returned home, he would find the ashtray on the table and cigars in the trash can. That was Jack's favorite brand, and it was highly likely that the person who had just been there was Jack. The two of them must have done something unspeakable. Harold didn't confront his wife directly, though. That night, lying in bed, he couldn't sleep, filled with anxiety. He'd held his feelings in for too long, and now he just couldn't keep it inside anymore. The next day, he went straight to Jack's office and shot him. Watching Jack fall, gasping for air, a bullet in his forehead lying on the desk, Harold couldn't help but smirk. Maybe he had been planning this all along. He thought about going home to say goodbye to his wife and then turning himself in at the police station. But then, an unexpected twist occurred. As Harold arrived home, he froze in shock. The same model of car as Jack's was parked in front of his house again. Harold rushed inside, hoping to catch them in the act. But when he walked in, he was stunned. There, in the bed, was his wife with a young male model, looking like they'd just finished. It turned out he had wrongly accused Jack. His wife had been having an affair with the model. The car was just a coincidence. Harold stood there in complete silence, realizing he had made a huge mistake. He felt a deep regret, but there was nothing left to say. He simply walked into the bathroom, lost in his thoughts. At that moment, Phil urged the model to quickly leave. Staring into the mirror, Harold thought about the times Jack had bullied him back in middle school. But now Jack had apologized, and he had realized he'd been wrong about everything. He felt too ashamed to go on living, and maybe it was the hopelessness of middle-aged life that made him feel this way. As Phil stood there, unsure how to explain things, the sound of a gunshot rang out. Harold had ended it all. The 8th story begins with Anna and her lover, Roland, lay in bed after making love, casually chatting. Anna gently hinted at what was on her mind, saying this secret affair can't go on. She doesn't ask for much. She just wants to spend the rest of her life with him, quietly and steadily. Anna always gave herself completely to Roland, treating him like royalty. But the long wait without any commitment or promises started to wear on Roland, and he felt guilty. Without hesitation, he proposed to Anna. Anna, however, hesitated. She told Roland that it wasn't that she didn't love him, but because Roland still hadn't divorced his wife Vivienne, she wasn't sure if their relationship could last. Upon hearing this, Roland made up his mind. He immediately went home to ask for a divorce. Vivienne was fully aware of his affair with Anna. Upon hearing about the divorce, Vivienne lashed out, saying he cheated on her and she hadn't done anything wrong in this marriage. If he wants to leave, he better pay back the money he owes her father from his startup. Her reputation is more important than his feelings. She decides not to divorce him. She will keep him hanging, and he'll be miserable. Roland fought back with some words, but deep down, he knew he was in the wrong. That evening, Roland went to Anna's place and repeated everything that had happened. When he said he would file for divorce, Anna revealed that she was pregnant. Roland, both overjoyed and overwhelmed, realized there was no turning back. The next day, Roland focused on accompanying Anna to her prenatal checkup. He thought it would be a new beginning, but an unexpected twist came. The doctor informed them that Anna's myopia had worsened and there was a risk of blindness if it continued. The doctor suggested she undergo a corneal transplant, reassuring her that the procedure wouldn't affect her pregnancy. However, the question was, how would they afford it? The burden fell on Roland. When Roland returned home, he asked his wife if she could help with the money for Anna's surgery. Vivienne snapped back, saying she would not help him and his mistress. With that, Roland left in frustration. As Roland drove back to Anna's house, stuck at a red light on a country road, anxiety consumed him. He suddenly came up with a drastic solution. He could only kill his wife. When he arrived at Anna's place, he pretended to deliver good news that his wife agreed to lend him the money for her surgery. It's all arranged. Returning home, Roland told Vivienne that he made up his mind. He's going to run away with Anna. They're leaving for Europe tomorrow. Vivienne, seething with rage, warned him that she wouldn't let him make it to the airport. Seeing that Vivienne had taken the bait, Roland used a brief moment to tamper with the car's brakes. That evening, he made sure Vivienne saw his packed luggage. The next morning, Roland called Vivienne from a phone booth to tell her about his flight details. Vivienne, determined to stop him, packed quickly and drove to London Airport. As predicted, Vivienne drove too fast, trusting the brakes. In a tragic turn of events, she lost control of the car and crashed into a ditch. No one was around to help, and she died instantly. Even though her parents suspected Roland, the police found no evidence to implicate him, and the case was closed. Roland wasted no time in using some of Vivienne's inheritance to cover Anna's surgery costs. That night, he visited Anna in the hospital, kissing her gently. Anna, still blind after the surgery, asked if he was sure he wanted to marry her. Roland smiled and assured her, saying they would remove the bandages on Wednesday and he would come to see her then. Wednesday came, and Roland brought flowers to Anna's room. The doctor had already removed the bandages, and Anna excitedly announced that the surgery had been a success. She praised the hospital for performing its first successful corneal transplant. But just as Roland was celebrating, Anna added that she owed her new eyes to the woman who donated the corneas. She was in a car accident last Saturday and died. Her family agreed to the donation that same day, and she had her surgery on the same day. Roland's smile slowly faded. As Anna took off her glasses, he stared at her eyes, so shocked to realize these were his wife Vivienne's eyes. The ninth story begins with only a few days left until Christmas. Henry, the manager of a toy company, was feeling quite excited. For the past 30 years, it had been his tradition to organize the company's Christmas party. But on his drive to work, something unexpected happened. After a few brief exchanges with his young colleague and his female secretary, Henry gathered the latest news. A foreign company was planning to acquire their toy company. The top brass had already made it clear that while they would keep Henry's department intact, due to his age, they were planning to replace him with a younger manager. When Henry heard this, he was shocked, realizing that he's going to lose his job. This year marked his 40th anniversary at the company, and he had hoped to make his final Christmas party memorable. However, things were already changing. His secretary revealed that many colleagues felt the past parties had been too traditional, lacking excitement. They had secretly agreed to have the young colleague organize this year's party, and it would feature a more youthful vibe, with disco music and decorations geared toward the younger crowd. Henry felt a pang of loss, and sensing the reality of the situation, sought out the higher-ups for confirmation. His worries were justified. The acquisition was real. Christmas Eve arrived quickly. Henry had hoped that, even though he wasn't organizing the party this year, attending would still be a chance for some festive cheer. But what the receptionist told him caught him completely off guard and left him feeling deflated. She said the party was at the new office building. This one's been sold and they're moving out in a couple of days. Henry was stunned, wondering how the receptionist knew this when he, a department manager, didn't. It seemed the boss had completely forgotten about him. Back at his office, Henry, alone with his drink, stared at the decorations he had set up for the party, decorations that now seemed pointless. As he drank, his frustration grew. He decided to head to the new office's disco party early. Once there, he lit a cigar and poured himself a drink. No one seemed to care about him, so he figured he'd say goodbye to himself. Walking to the front, he muttered to himself that he had served this company for 40 years. Maybe he's retiring soon. He wishes them all the best for the future. In a moment of frustration, he knocked the cigar onto the tablecloth, and it ignited. Henry, seeing the flames, quickly poured his drink over them and fled the scene. The fire spread quickly and chaos ensued. Later, as firefighters arrived to extinguish the blaze, Henry felt uneasy, a sinking feeling in his chest. Just then, the boss, the young colleague, and Henry's wife approached him, and the truth was revealed. The party tonight was actually for Henry. They were going to invite the mayor, but with the fire, it's a little complicated. They told Henry the disco was a smokescreen. It was all a setup, and Henry was the real star tonight. The boss then handed Henry a Swiss gold watch, saying he had served the company for 40 years, and they remembered him. Henry's eyes welled up with tears as he listened, deeply moved by their words. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.